Hi, today we're going to be talking about education. Again, I wish I could claim all these ideas as my ideas, but they come from the A New Vision for America, the Libertarian pamphlet that I mentioned in a previous video. So again, I wish I could claim these ideas as mine, but they're not mine. So I'm going to be going through the section that's called Delivering World-Class Education. And I'm gonna talk about that. It's interesting. Both the Republicans and the Democrats, talk about education, about improving our children's education, which, I would agree with them. It is important that we do need a good education for our children and the young people who will be, the leader. I guess you could say the leaders of tomorrow, right? But their answer goes to public education. And to be honest, I don't think this is a good idea. And the Libertarians, they back it up with St. Adalbert's, a school in Cleveland, Ohio called St. Adalbert's, which is a private school largely free from many of the problems that typically hinder progress in the inner city public schools. Basically, this school, from it's my understanding, it's free of gangs, drugs, pregnancy, and violence. There is no need for security anymore. Most schools have some kind of security guards or police officers. Last year I was a substitute teacher, and most schools I was a substitute teacher at. There was security guards there was police officers there. At the end of the day, they had police officers that kind of watched everyone and did some other things too. But this was something I noticed. But this school doesn't have security guards. So anyway, St. Adalbert's is one of the best schools in our country, and it is not due to massive tuition fees. Tuition at St. Adalbert's is roughly 1/7 the average cost per student in American public schools, and the school spends less than 1/3 as much per student as the local government school that is comparable in size. So what is it that makes St. Adalbert's school different than a public school, which is probably receiving than the average public school that's probably receiving a lot more funding? The secret is it's not run by the government. You see, the problem with public schools, and this is something I believe, and this is why my wife and I, with our daughter, we plan to either send her to private school or homeschool. The problem is the schools are public schools are run by the government. And I'm not saying that there aren't good public schools out there. There probably are good public schools out there. But they all have some problems, and they all stem from the fact that the government's running it. It says in this article that that St. Adalbert's is a component of the free market. In other words, it must educate students well, or parents will remove their children and send them to another school. This is a simple idea. Now think of it like this. If you have a kid that's going to public school, wherever you live, that's where that's the district that your school's in if you're going to public school. And if you're unhappy with this school, you basically have to move to a different school district. But imagine if you could take your kid to another school where, if you're unhappy with this school, and oftentimes, many parents, if one parent's unhappy, I'm willing to wager there's probably many parents who are unhappy. Imagine if all the parents decided to pull their school and take them to their kids from the school and pull them and take them to a school that's a few miles away. And then basically the school would be losing funds, and basically what would happen is they'd have to start firing teachers. It goes on to say, even with additional money devoted to education, the government schools can't get the job done. Instead, public schools are in essence rewarded for bad behavior. For example, American high school SAT scores fell an average of 50 points between 1970 and 1995. During the same time, federal spending on education nearly doubled from $19 billion to $35 billion. So basically, bad scores are, that schools are, basically these students are having lower test scores, yet we're filtering more tax money in, but it's not getting good result. The students are not doing as well as they should, despite the $35 billion that that it records that it jumped from 19 billion to 35 billion between 1970 and 1995. The Libertarian Party, it goes on to say, the Libertarians don't believe we are getting a good return on our investment in the case of public schools. Providing more choices in education is a positive step. So basically, we need more choices in education, right? And sometimes I would mean if we have more schools, we could have smaller. I'm thinking we could have smaller schools, smaller classrooms, more attention for, the students. So basically, one of the Libertarians' ideas is to enact a federal dollar-for-dollar tax credit for any individual or company who pays for a child's education. So basically, if you're paying for your kid's education, or let's say you're the owner of a general store down the street or something like that, and you decide to help educate a kid, you're going to be returned dollar for dollar. This is something we don't do right now. It goes on to talk about another program in Arizona which allows taxpayers to donate up to $500 for scholarships and get that money back dollar for dollar at tax filing time. This program has raised $32 million since 1997 and has funded more than 19,000 scholarships, 80% of which are for the children from financially needy families. Nationally, such programs give parents more choice, allowing them to choose the educational services that are best for their children. So basically, it's my understanding that Arizona has some of the poorest areas in our country. Maybe they're not the poorest, but it has quite a few. Yet about 80. It says about yet all these needy families, they're donating money, and so basically they're donating money, right? So basically the Libertarians' idea, and I would agree with this, is that we get the federal government out of education. And you see, this is another problem I have is, there's areas where the federal government even cracks down on homeschooling, and the reason why is because there are some situations where they're right on, where the homeschooling isn't as good as public education, but more often than not, they're actually ahead of if you take a kid who's about 6th grade age in a public school and you take the average kid who's homeschooled in the same grade, that 6th grader is usually ahead of the kid in public school. So the problem is that they want everyone to be at this standard, basically. So what's wrong with someone being ahead? That's what I don't understand. So, it's basically everyone has to be at the same level, which is funny because, even in the public schools, not everyone is at the same level. It goes on to say, Libertarians believe the decision and funding for education should be left to the states, communities, and parents. Since 1980, more than $550 billion has been routed through the federal bureaucrats and the Department of Education. The federal government accounts for about 6% of all educational spending, but roughly 1/3 of all regulations. Regulations do not make education better. And it kind of ends this section with saying, if the federal government wants to ensure that no child is left behind, it needs to put more money and more choices in the hands of the American people rather than taking those choices away. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier about, let's say I'm unhappy with a public school, let's say the teachers aren't teaching well, or I just don't like the teachers. I can put my child in another school that's, several miles away. I mean, it just makes sense. So anyway, that's the section on delivering world-class education from the A New Vision for America, the Libertarian Party. So anyway, take care and God bless you all.